Do you ever ask yourself, am I playing too small? Have I left it too late to start afresh? Will I come to the end of my life and feel that I somehow let myself down? This is your invitation to hear from some amazing people who have asked themselves those very same questions and chose to wake the F up, to get off the hamster wheel of mediocrity and seize the life that was calling them. Be inspired and be challenged to discover who you have the potential to become and the contribution you're here to make. And now, here to guide you on the most important quest of your life is your host, Janet Hogan.
Have you ever been through a situation you would describe as deeply traumatic? You know, maybe divorce, bankruptcy, a business breakup, a feud with your own children, chronic illness, the list goes on and on. These are the moments that shape our lives, often for the worse, but sometimes for the better. Perhaps the true measure of who we are is not so much what happens to us, but what we do with that experience. My next guest is a remarkable example of just how resilient we humans can be when plunged into one of these nightmare situations. In fact, so debilitating was the pain of dealing with what happened to her, it saw her end up in a psych ward. In her own words, it's as if she had somehow fallen through the cracks of her own life to be plunged into a state of sheer panic and desperation until she was so exhausted, she no longer had the energy for anything, even anxiety. Today, this same person who 7 years ago spent her days curled up in fetal position and was diagnosed with major depression, joins us to share how she climbed out of the pit of her despair to where she's enjoying life running a thriving content marketing and PR business. I hope if you've been through any kind of emotionally challenging situation, you'll be inspired by her story. Natalie Coulson, welcome to Wake the F Up.
Thank you, Janet. It's exciting.
Well, yeah, I'm so pleased you feel that now, because I bet that wasn't how you felt a few years ago. Can you share with us, Natalie, that situation you found yourself in that brought you to this emotional and psychological crash? What was going on in your world to bring you to this point?
Well, I think ever since the age of about 14, I just didn't stop. So, which meant I was a high achiever, career-wise. I had lots of, what they were called extracurricular activities at school. I did well in many areas. I was ticking off travel boxes, traveling all over the world with my backpack, and then later on, traveling for business. And then what happened is I found myself in a toxic relationship. And so not only was I absolutely burning out on a professional level, that just pushed me right over the edge. So the person that I thought would be supporting me completely did a 180. I mean, there were red flags early on, and anyone that's been through any sort of domestic violence will know that there are good times, there are bad times. It's not all one or the other. But ultimately, that's what absolutely pushed me over the edge.
And thanks for sharing that, Natalie, and being prepared to be so honest, because I know, when there are things that suddenly feel like they're going pear-shaped, there can be a sense of failure around that. Did you experience that? Did you start to kind of self-recriminate when you felt that there was something wrong with the relationship?
Absolutely. Well, I didn't even recognize there was something wrong with the relationship at first. It was all self-blame, and that was how things were manipulated. I can see that now. But so no, it was.
So Natalie, in my experience, we can really tend to, see if something goes wrong in our lives, we take it personally, like in some way we have failed. Can you tell us about that? Did you share that as well? Was that your experience?
Yeah, and I mean, I felt like I was starting to fail. So as I was burning out, I was just not able to keep up with the life that I built for myself. And so I started to feel that failure probably at work. And then that slid into my personal life. And then ultimately, I felt like everything had failed. And as I mentioned before, it was the domestic violence, the emotional abuse I was going through compounded that, because it was all placed back on me. I was the one with the problem. So, and I didn't recognize that until much later. But at the time, absolutely, I just didn't want to live anymore. And I can't believe I'm saying that, because I'm not that person. I wasn't early on in my life, and I'm certainly not now. I just didn't want to live anymore. I thought that I'd failed everyone and everything.
Mm. And so can you, just so we've got a little bit of a time reference here, how old were you when you entered into this relationship? And it ended up being a marriage, did it, or just a de facto relationship?
So it was a marriage. So I met him actually when I was 18, so quite young. And by the time I had the absolute breakdown, I was 35. So this is quite a number of years, and it's someone that you trust, someone that your family trusts. He's very much part of my life, and there were huge red flags early on, but of course you don't necessarily trust them, or they become so ingrained and enmeshed in your family and you're with your friendship groups. And this is why domestic violence relationships are so hard to leave, because, and then they do a 180 and they're lovely again. And so you question, well, what were they? Well, maybe it is me. So yeah, this was over quite a period of time. So we had, and we were from different countries. So there was this back and forth with different countries, which created times where we'd be missing each other. It sort of built up all this emotional yearning and control, and it was complex. But yeah, we ultimately got married after 10 years. And yeah, I'm still trying to free myself from him, even though it's 7 years later.
It's interesting, isn't it? I was listening to someone talking about addiction, actually. It was on the Russell Brand podcast. And she was a psychologist, and she was describing the roller coaster nature of it, that you get these extreme highs and also extreme lows. It's almost like that becomes a pattern of your life, and that's addictive in its own right, you know.
Yeah, the highs are incredibly addictive.
Yeah. So what were some of just for the benefit of anyone listening, because I know there are lots of people in relationships who are experiencing that sense of enmeshment and going, it would be so much easier just to stay here. And besides, there are so many good things about this relationship. You know, you start creating mental checklists of why you don't want to move on. What were some of the red flags that in the beginning you might have ignored, Natalie, which you realise now were actual definite signs that there wasn't something healthy about the relationship?
It's also textbook now, that it's almost embarrassing to talk about it. And that, I think, was where maybe some of the shame comes in for me and for other people, because you think, oh, how come I didn't notice? But when you're 18 and somebody is telling you you're wonderful, and I mean, I'd come from a great family. Like, there was no real reason to hook up with someone who wasn't going to treat me well, but he was a super fun. And, but I think in terms of red flags, or very early on, he said, oh, do you think you could care for me? And I mean, it was incredibly early on. I was 18. He was an exchange student, and I'm thinking, this is a fling. I'm not thinking anything of it. And we're having a great time. So that was probably red flag number one. And then he went away. And then when he went away, he wanted to stay in touch. And ultimately, he went away for a couple of weeks, and he'd extend it to a longer period. Actually, it was 3 days at first, and then a couple of weeks. And then he was away back to Canada for 6 months. And then he said, oh, and then as soon as I said, no, it's over, I'm not going to keep waiting, then he booked his flight. And it was always keeping me on there, like baiting me. And that continued, that is something, it still continues, actually, because I'm not divorced from him. And so I think that's another thing, is because you're almost told not to speak up like this unless you're divorced. And so he's kept stringing me along. And that's another thing they do. They keep delaying things. So you keep quiet. And your family just doesn't see this other side of them. And so they think that they're wonderful. You think that they're wonderful in front of your family. And it's only when you step away and you realize, in my case, I became, and again, textbook, incredibly isolated. I was in another country. I was telling him I wanted to move home, and it was always our agreement, I thought. But for one reason or another, I was kept there, and there was, even though my job had fallen apart, and there was no real reason for me to stay. He keeps finding reasons for me to stay there so that he can be in control. And that at that point, it became financially controlling as well. So that's ultimately what I escaped. But because I was so beaten down, I thought it was all my fault, because I'd gone to Canada with him, and there were all these things there which were my choice, hypothetically, but I'd been so manipulated into that situation.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting how, because I've been in a situation, not in a relationship, but I suppose a relationship with money, which is another type of relationship, and suffering terrible losses. And I particularly remember the shame around that, and the fact that it was all my fault, even though this was, when Wall Street crashed. So it was pretty understandable why it happened. But I was really relating to what you were saying about being a super high achiever, in the early days. And I wonder if that's setting a lot of us up for this. We become accustomed to getting our gratification externally, through praise of others. And I kind of see it's almost inevitable that we might be attracted to someone who maintains that, who tells us how wonderful we are constantly. That becomes addictive as well. Did you find that, Natalie, that was kind of you're almost sucked into that?
Yeah, he just knew. He would pick up on everything that I loved or I wanted more of. Travel. I've got close family, but most of them are spread in different places in different countries, but his are all in one town. And he was able to bring me into his world where he kind of was able to tick all the boxes, but then turn it around so that he was in control, which was really bizarre. But I think he was actually feeding off me a lot of the time. So although he had this emotional control, it was my high achieving and my my grasp of money and my dreams for things that he was grabbing onto. And I hear that a lot. These types of people, a narcissist in my case, they are attracted to strong people and high achievers. So it's kind of a real trap.
Yeah, because in both scenarios, you're talking about people, and I talk about myself here too. We lose a sense of who we really are, right? We become disconnected from the true self. So it's almost like we seek completion in another. And for a time, it feels really right. And then there's a realization that there's something, deeply wrong with it. Can you, did you have a point that you remember that was, what we might call the dark night of the soul, Natalie, where you felt you couldn't have got to anywhere lower than where you got to at this particular moment?
Yeah, I mean, there was the time that led me into the psych ward where, I was very suicidal, and I'd never thought I would ever get to anything like that because, I'm generally one of these people who loves life, and I am that person again. But yeah, I remember that, and I just thought, I've got this, it's over. There's nothing, my life's over. But then I think that, and I know just from reading your questions that you sent through, that then you kind of bounce along the bottom. And so, I ended up in the psychiatric facility. And it's interesting because a lot of the people in there, and I'm learning about this from other podcasts I'm listening to around domestic violence specifically, a lot of women, it's mostly women, there are men, end up in these places, you've been so worn down that you're exhibiting symptoms of severe mental health issues or mental illness, but they're not taking into account that there's been an external influence. There's been a relationship that's caused this. And that's not taking away from people that have other mental illnesses. But it's a huge problem, particularly with women being traumatized by their husbands and worse. But I think to answer your question about and I haven't heard that specific expression before, night of the soul, but there was the time when I started to come out of things as well. So the bouncing along and then coming out. And that was really when I started to realize it was this relationship that was causing most of the problems. Yes, I was burning myself out and working too hard, but that is what put me over the edge. And once I realized that, then everything started to move in the right direction.
Yeah. It's a fascinating journey, which when you look back on it, it's interesting you can talk about it so frankly. So you must have done a lot of work on yourself and a lot of introspecting. But before you got to that point of being able to separate yourself a little bit from what was actually going on in your life, what were some of the thoughts that you were telling yourself, some of the negative thoughts? What were some of the stories that were running through your mind?
Well, I'd been through the anxiety phase, and this is quite common too. You go through the anxiety phase, and I had been taking an anti-anxiety medication. And so that wasn't necessarily thoughts. It was more just this overwhelmed anxiety, probably that many of us have felt. But I think then going into the thoughts that were sort of the next phase of that, it was the rumination. And what was different between that anxiety where you're worried about the future and your sweaty palms and your chest is tight and it's so much fear of just keeping up with life, to actually just hitting that wall. I think it's a psychotic break is one explanation. You just don't care anymore, just get apathetic. So there's the physical symptoms of just being apathetic, looking like just being so tired and fatigued. But then the thoughts are just constantly looking backwards. So instead of worried about things, which I feel is anxiety, you're worried about looking forward. Okay, there's some looking back, but depression for me was constant ruminating about what I'd done wrong and how I'd gotten to this point, which was just this wall I couldn't seem to move forward. It just there was no future. And I'm a planner. Like, I'm thinking about things. I'm now planning things that are 5, 10, 20 years in the future. No, I'm trying not to plan, to the T, but that's just so uncharacteristic of me. And I think that's one thing I've learned is this can happen to anybody.
Yeah. Well, I think that's why it's so valuable to have these conversations, so that because I know I did the same thing for the space of a year. I would just ruminate. I'd lie in bed going, if only I'd done this, if only I hadn't done that. And till I eventually, I think, made myself go crazy. And I ended up with PTSD for probably not too long, about 3 months, but to a point where my synapses wouldn't fire anymore. I could look at an inbox in my emails and not be able to actually physically open an email, or let alone answer it. So it sounds like there's a system crash that happened at some point.
Yes.
Where whether it's physically or mentally or both, there's something that just, you described it as hitting that wall where you just need time out.
I felt like I ran into a brick wall. Like, I remember the day when it was like this elastic band in my head and it was just snap. Yeah. And I suppose it didn't all happen that day, but I feel like that was literally a breaking point. I feel like these expressions come from somewhere. Breaking point, hitting a wall, it's because it happens in our brain. Yes. And it was pretty confronting.
Oh, totally. Well, no one prepares us for this. That's the thing. And quite often our parents and those around us try and smooth it over, to say, oh, you'll be fine, you'll get through it. Or, but that dark night of the soul really is a line from the hero's journey. So, and of course, the hero, what you're talking about here is you start off in the ordinary world, and then there's a calling, and in this case, it's a relationship. And then, of course, you plummet into the netherworld of yourself, with the darkest part. But then something happens and you start to shift out of the darkness. So speak to us about that, Natalie. Was there a point where you consciously decided that you were going to shift away from this darkness, or how did it happen? How did the exit out happen for you?
Well, I think I was in CAMH in Canada. What's it called? The Centre of Addiction and Mental Health. Anyway, they had a big quote on the wall, and I cannot even remember I keep trying to recall the quote, but this is what our brains are like during going through these things. I just can't recall it. But it was a quote I looked at every day, and finally it clicked for me. And it was some inspirational, like, you're here now, but you won't always be. And there's a something like that, bright future. And so I think that, waking up every day to that quote began the process. And then I just you're talking about not being able to answer emails. I just couldn't brush my teeth, couldn't be bothered. Who cares? And I couldn't brush my hair, or I didn't even bother. I think at the hospital they had just shampoo, no conditioner. And I just thought, well, I'll just use shampoo. And so finally I was making the realization that I am worth conditioner. And I started putting conditioner in my hair, and I thought I deserve to brush my teeth every day. And I specifically remember one day, and it was November, so it was grey and horrible outside. I remember looking up at I started noticing things. So like the girl next to me, her family would bring things in. She had all the bells and whistles. They'd be offering me food, and I had like almost nothing. And then I just started to that was where the self-care, I didn't know it was called self-care, but that's where I realized I was worth more than this nothingness that I thought I was only worth. And I looked up at the sky and I thought, I can do this. And what I wanted to do was get back to Australia, because I knew that's where I really wanted to be. And all the things I'd kept telling myself, like, real estate's too expensive, my family won't understand, it's been 11 years, so all my friends are doing other things. I just didn't care at that moment. And I looked at the sky and I thought, it's crap here, but I can do this. So that really was a turning point. And it was pretty quick after that when I managed to book a flight from from the public phone in there, because they won't let you keep your mobile phones with you. But that was all. It's all to look after you, because it just allows you to separate from whatever it is that's causing all of the trauma, so you can ultimately think clearly.
Did you relate to anyone else who was staying in the same ward? Were you reaching out to other people?
And that's the thing. There were probably a third of the people there are what you would expect to find in a mental health institution. The other 2/3 were people just going through traumas, and you knew they were going to recover. So those are the people that I could relate to, and I kind of started to make friends, and I realized that I could make friends away from the crazy life that I'd created, where everyone thought of me as this person I was in an advertising role for a big publishing company. So I wasn't that person. I was just me, and I could relate to them on a very simple level and away from my toxic relationship. So yes, but no one really understood. I always felt like the other, because I was from another country. But even so, yeah, they definitely did. And I know that, and the girl that was next to me, her parents took us out for dinner, and there was just some really warming things that were happening. I thought, I can create a new life. I don't need to be in the life that I had. And it was very liberating, even though I was still really unwell at that point.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I'm trying to picture you standing at the public phone booking your airline ticket. But it sounds like that was a very seminal moment, like a very symbolic piece of action taking, literally choosing to fly. So what happened then when you landed back in Australia? What greeted you back home?
My parents were at that point understanding to a point that I had to be back because of other events that had happened in the year prior. I thought, no, I've got a very short time with them. They actually it was New Year's Eve when I arrived back. So they threw a big New Year's Eve party, and they said, well, this is distracting and fun. And they're not really big party people. So it's kind of a big deal. And but then I was everything was small steps to rebuild my life. And I'm a bit impatient. So I knew it was frustrating having to do really basic things again. But I think what was really interesting over the couple of years that followed is I started to do really basic things. I went to live where I thought I would live even though like before my ex had insisted we live somewhere else. So I was recreating this path that I thought that I was going to travel before, but that is so confusing with the reverse culture shock. And yeah, there was a lot of confusion, but I really stayed the course. And I did things like waitressing just for a little bit because I'd done that as a teen and that felt comfortable. And so I'd always been pushing the envelope and doing more than I could or more than I should. And I focused for a while on just living well. And I even though my financial situation was not good at that point, even though it had been, I just didn't focus on that. I thought I just have to get through at first every day. And then it was just small periods of time. So it took a few years for me to realize how I can set those big goals again, and made peace with that.
So it's an amazing, let's call it heroine's journey that you've been on. When you look back on it, how do you think it has positively affected you? How do you think, do you feel that you have grown from this experience?
Amazingly, like I'm so pleased it happened, because it shows you who your friends are. And I created a whole new, I've been putting up with people and putting up with situations, and some of it just melted away. And other things I thought I just couldn't be bothered with that anymore. I literally didn't have the energy. And so I just created a whole new support network. I started focusing on the things that were meaningful to me. I was just grateful to be alive and grateful to be healthy. And even though, still health challenges after that, but I could mentally, I could manage it all so much better. So.
And Natalie, if you just could describe for us where you're at now, how are you spending your days right now?
So now I'm running my own content marketing and PR business. I realized that I actually didn't want to be an employee anymore. And I think this is where, for me, the huge transformation has happened, in that I don't like people telling me what to do. I don't want to be controlled. And I want to run my own show. And before that, I was child of school teachers, where I did as I was told and had my head down and ticking boxes. And now I listen to my intuition and I work with people I want to work with. I recognize what my skills are, and I'm working with clients from government level to small businesses and empowering them to stand up and speak up and share their own stories. And it's going from strength to strength. So I've got big plans, but I'm trying to pace myself.
Well, you've described where you've been, this tumultuous past, but I think it's so valuable to share it, because so many others are in a maybe a similar space, or just a space of shame under totally different circumstances. But it seems like we're wired for that. So thank you for sharing that. And also for letting us know where you're at now and how you've come out of it. It sounds like you've come out of it a stronger person with a lot more self-knowledge, like to be able to tap into your, that inner knowing that you described. So let's now look at the life going forward. Now you completed this exercise, an online exercise I put together called the Magic Triangle Quiz. And so what we'll do now, Natalie, is look at what 3 core needs came up for you, because this is interesting. This is all about, for anyone who's listening who might be feeling a little bit unclear on their path forward, or what really is their authentic path. What does that even mean? When we're in this space of high achievement, it's very easy to lose a sense of self. We actually don't know who we are. And that's when we can fall victim to bright, shiny object syndrome. And sometimes those bright, shiny objects come to us in the form of people. And we feel that they can hold the answers to, this feeling of void that might be in us, this feeling of emptiness, that they might be able to fulfill that. But what I like about this exercise is it's not about seeking from the outside, but actually seeking from within. So let's look at what came up for you as in terms of the 3 core needs. So if you can picture a triangle, and at the base of the triangle, you've got endurance and abundance, bottom left, bottom right corner, endurance and abundance. And then up the top, this is the core need, the number 1, self-respect. So what I'm going to ask you now, Natalie, is just to go through each of those and tell us what each of those mean, looking at life through your lens, what they mean from your perspective. And we'll start with endurance. Tell us about that, why that came up as one of your top 3.
Endurance, I picked endurance because I know that to achieve everything that I want to achieve now, I need to be able to stay the course and work hard, but not burn out. So I'm actually, I'm not worried about motivation. I'm not worried about not achieving. So I understand. And it's funny because I've been collaborating with an Olympic trainer. And so we've been discussing this, and Olympians have time to rest, and they've got their times of peak performance, but then they have their downtime. And so I'm learning from her about how to have the importance of endurance for achieving and in the long term, because it's a marathon and not a sprint, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's really interesting. So yeah, giving back to yourself, I'm hearing from that, is the key to endurance, giving yourself that downtime without feeling guilty. Would that be right?
Yeah, I still feel guilty, but I know I shouldn't. But then I'll just go with that as well. So
yeah, that's
like,
right.
okay, I feel a bit guilty. And I think that's another thing. It's accepting you. Yeah, you're not going to be in, I shouldn't say perfect mental health. That's the first thing that comes to my mind. It's okay to have these thoughts, like I feel guilty, or yeah, I'm a bit ashamed of that. But it's then turning it around and going, yeah, okay, that's all right, but I'm not going to focus on that. And so that's how I've shifted so much mentally.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that. So we've got endurance, and now we've got the next one is abundance, and that's a word that can be interpreted so many different ways. Tell us why abundance is so important to you, Natalie.
So yeah, I'm thinking mostly of financial abundance, because I've been through periods of time, and it's interesting hearing you describe your journey, Janet, because where I felt financially abundant, I was on the right track. I'd read personal finance magazines. I was just right into it. And then I've had the shame of really not being in a great financial position. And so abundance for me at the moment, I'm focusing a lot on financial abundance, but it's up until probably 2 years ago, the abundance was around people around me and a support network. So I built that first, and that's interesting to have that perspective, because those are the things that are more important, and looking after my health. But money does actually come in there, and that's what, at the moment, that's what abundance means for me.
Yeah, it's interesting looking at that expression abundance, and there's also another aspect to it which you might resonate with, Natalie, which is a feeling of, it's not necessarily having lots of something, it's having enough of something, and there's quite a big difference. So I remember reading about King Henry VIII and listening to reading about what he would eat in a day. It was incredible. It was something, a massive amount. He had 13 separate meals apparently. So he must have been virtually constantly eating. And when he died, he weighed about 400 pounds, and it would be, they had to crane him onto his horses. But you would say he had an abundance of food, that could be interpreted as an abundance, but actually he was probably coming from scarcity when you think about it, to have this compulsion to eat so much. And we can crave things, other things, not in the physical realm. We can crave in relationships, we can crave something because we don't feel it in ourselves. And so what I realize is when we are truly abundant, our primary belief becomes, I am enough, not just I have enough money or I have enough food or whatever it is, friends, work, but I am enough. And I feel that's where some of us can really struggle in that entrepreneurial high achievement space. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think, and that is the biggest gift. So it's hitting the nail on the head of what the big breakdown has done for me, because from that, seriously, that moment when I looked at the sky and it was grey and it was, I thought that was what I was thinking. Like, I didn't think of those words, but it's like, I can do this. Like, I'm enough.
Yeah.
And that's what I've really focused on up until this point, where I thought, I'm thinking, okay, my focus is on finances now. But I think that's carried through, and that is the biggest gift, is that you realize that we're always enough. We're whole, right? Without any of this other external stuff.
Yeah. It sounds really simple, doesn't it?
No, but I had to feel like absolute nothingness to become this person who values the super simple things that I was just too busy to notice for a long time.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So let's now move up to the big one, self-respect. Tell us about that, why that's so important and why that made it to the top of the triangle.
It's interesting that it did, because I think it's just so connected, because to feel self-respect, I want that financial abundance, and I want I don't want to feel the shame. So it's not saying I don't have a self-respect. It's that is still the most important thing. And it just goes back to what we were talking about, that feeling whole and feeling enough is the most important thing.
And so when you're in that space of respecting yourself, can you just describe that? What are the emotions behind that, Natalie? What does that feel like?
It doesn't mean I'm feeling super strong every day, but it's a general feeling of stability in my mind and happy that I've made a certain effort with things, or that I've practiced gratitude. It's really hard to put into words, actually. So maybe that's something I need to work on.
Well, or, sometimes we can't put emotions into words. That's the other thing. But
I think the thing is, self-respect for me was so linked to achievement in the past. It was, and so it's keeping that, maintaining that feeling of self-respect regardless of the achievement.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. So really switching from respect coming from an external source to self-respect. Yeah. So it's really,
even though those other things are important, it's not, those things aren't the most. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh, that feels a lot more solid. All right. So how the triangle works, it's kind of uncanny that what floats to the top is definitely what is most important to you, your greatest need at this point in time. But how you achieve that is by creating a solid base. And the solid base is actually achieved by looking at endurance and abundance, creating those. So it's like you're building, you don't build a house from the top down, do you? So you wouldn't just go, oh, I'm going to practice on feeling self-respect, because it doesn't work that way. You have to start with the foundation. And so what you've got here is a foundation that's built basically on these two factors: endurance plus abundance, or an abundant mindset. So having a very clear idea of the importance of maintaining a position, seeing life as a marathon, not as a sprint, understanding, I guess, what's inherent in that belief then is that there will be tough times, but it's a bit like, I suppose, not just a marathon, a bit of a steeplechase at the same time. You've got to jump over hurdles, but it's still a long course, and that's okay if there are days that present those hurdles. So that's really a mindset shift, isn't it? To going, I'm not expecting every day to be wonderful, because it's not necessarily about today. It's about staying the course. And then with that abundance coming from that, as you stay on that course, you start to build this sense of, yes, I am enough. And in this state of I am enough, life is abundant. I am abundant. And so financial freedom and having financial security is very important, but maybe you don't need as much as you might have previously thought. I know that was the case for me. I thought I'd only be happy if I had a private jet. I was in that crazy mindset.
I don't need that, but yeah.
No. But these are the delusional states that it's so easy for us to enter into. But now my requirements have really massively simplified. And yet I feel more prosperous, if you like, than I've ever felt before. Maybe not financially wealthy, but prosperous on all sorts of other levels. So does that make sense, Natalie, that there's an instruction that comes with this triangle, and the instruction is get in place the endurance first. That's number one. Create that sense of it is a marathon. I'm not going to, fall over at the first hurdle. I know that I might have to crash through some of them. That's fine. And then from that, you're going to build this sense of abundance. And the more you do this, the more you'll realize that you are absolutely enough. And that's going to be the key that unlocks the final one, self-respect, rather than gaining respect from others. Does that resonate?
Very true. Yeah, it does resonate. Yeah, it's a good exercise.
Yeah, well, I'm a great, my background's advertising, so I'm used to communication in 30 seconds or a 3-second billboard. So it's all about, if you don't make it simple, you've lost someone. Yes. But what I do, I revisit this exercise every 6 months or so, and I draw it up actually on my wall right now. I draw my triangle up on my wall just as a reminder, and to really put a big red ring around that bottom left one, because that's the starting point, and that's what will bring you to self-respect. And then as you attain self-respect, you'll find it becomes almost circular. Self-respect then feeds more perseverance or endurance, and almost becomes like a cyclic thing.
And I think it's a really good reminder around abundance, because I think lately I've been thinking much more around financial abundance, and it's a good reminder that it's not actually just that to get that self-respect, or maintain it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you can see abundance as first and foremost a mindset about yourself, then you'll be less compelled to fill yourself with external things, whatever they are. Literally work, relationships that might not be healthy, food, bright shiny objects, going shopping, retail therapy. And of course we need much more money for all those things. That's the other thing. So I'm enough is a great fun, money saving strategy as well.
Yes.
Okay, the other thing that's interesting too with this is that once you start to fulfill these needs in yourself, this is what you'll start to project out into the world. So, that they say that expression, when you get out of your own way, that's kind of what this speaks to, that when you feel self-fulfillment, then these are the things that you will also give to the world. So just purely say to do with your work that you do. So self-respect is something, once you achieve it for yourself, that becomes your why in a way, the reason you get out of bed, because every time you honor yourself just by getting out of bed, taking those actions that you need to take, whatever they are, that will keep building that self-respect, and you'll keep feeling better about yourself. That feeling of shame that we're all wired with will start to dissipate. So that's kind of your why. And it's interesting that it's also potentially a gift that you have to give to others, possibly through helping them see who they are through the content that you write for them, that they develop a sense of self through your ability to do storytelling on their behalf. Does that make sense? Can you relate to that?
Yes, it does. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, because why you'd be so good at this? Because you felt the pain of not having it, and you can relate very much to that, to others that way. And then basically your what you bring to the table is an abundance. So I guess that could be interpreted many different ways. It could be by providing, quite literally an abundance of services to someone, or maybe it is actually also helping someone else see that they are abundant, that they are enough. I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, no, it all makes sense.
And then the how you do this is through endurance. So you just take this long-term perspective on your work. If you feel that this is really the work that you are supposed to be doing, and it sounds like it is actually, or I get that sense anyway, then how you will be successful is by applying this mindset of endurance. So Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's great.
All right. Okay. So thank you for taking part in that exercise, the magic triangle. Let's just wind up. I'd love for you just to say a few words to anyone else who might be where you were, if we can just do a fast rewind to 7 years ago, Natalie, someone who might have been in that state of crazy anxiety, or even that sense of depression where they can't even do anything. They're probably not listening to this podcast, but they might be. What message would you like to leave someone who's feeling that how you did 7 years ago?
Well, you definitely won't feel like that forever. And it's treatable, which I remember walking at thinking, oh, I'm not going to go and take anything or see anyone. And for some reason, that is part of mental health struggles, but it's treatable and you're not letting anybody down. And to start listening to your intuition, because when you're feeling absolutely, at rock bottom, your intuition might not be telling you very much at all. But you're being slowed down and stopped for a reason because you have to change course. And so that's kind of what the people that have been reaching out to me recently, because I've been quite vocal about this during Mental Health Month, is I said, no, this is stop, slow down. It's the worst thing. I get migraines now sometimes, and it's because I need to stop. And every time that happens, I'm like, oh, but I'm so busy. I haven't got time for a migraine. And then I remember, no, I always feel so much better and I have different perspective afterwards. You have to just slow down. So it's happening for a purpose, which is super frustrating, but that intuition will come in and you'll see it in really small increments at first, and then it will blow your mind how much transformation you're capable of.
Natalie Coulson, thank you so much for sharing your story. And you know what? If just one person hears this and benefits from it, it's been absolutely worthwhile. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Janet.
You have just listened to another enlightening episode of Wake the F Up with Janet Hogan. To find out more about the breakthrough, guided way to get off the hamster wheel and seize a life of freedom and fulfillment, visit janethogan.com/podcast for access to the show notes and to learn more about Janet's breakthrough work. Just remember, finding your true path isn't potluck, it's a process. Until next time.